So good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sasha Mensch, and I am the facilitator of the MSD task team at the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We are recording this webinar so we can put it up for everyone else later. And I have Ali Gillespie very helpfully supporting me in the background with text. So if you have any questions or issues for her, you can put it in the chat. And for those of you who have just joined, please put your name, organization, and where you're calling in from into the chat also. It's great to see so many people from around the world joining us. It is either very early in the day for some of you or very late in the day for others of you. So thank you for joining. And before we dive into the subject, I think hopefully many of you know this, but the Market Systems Development Task Team has been a project of the RSRI for about a year and a half. And in that time, we've produced a couple of documents on the fundamentals of market systems development and how they apply to refugee self-reliance. So if you haven't seen those, you can get on the RSRI website and look at those. And about a year ago, we did an MSD 101 webinar on the fundamentals of market systems development and how they apply to refugee self-reliance. That hopefully many of you participated in that webinar. If not, that is also available on the RSRI website, and I encourage you all to take a look at it. A couple of other things before we dig into the details. Sadly, this training is not in person. I much prefer to do things in person where I can see your faces. But the benefit of this is at least we can get people from all over the world. We will build in a few interaction moments to keep you engaged. So please participate when those come up. And we've kept chat and reactions enabled. So I will, a couple of times I'll stop and ask you for a thumbs up or a thumbs down to make sure that everyone's understanding what I'm saying. So just as a test now, please everybody give me a thumbs up to show that you saw it, that you've heard what I said. Great. I see some thumbs ups. Wonderful. Thank you. And please put all questions you have in the chat. We will have some time at the end to go through those. And also, if there's anything really fundamental that I don't explain well, put it in the chat and Ali will watch for that and we can go back to any of those bits as needed. Great. So let's get going because we have a lot to talk about and I do want to give time at the end for your questions. So as I said, a year and a half ago, or about a year ago, we did a general MSD 101 training. And today, this session is going to be more focused on applying MSD to a situation that, or a type of programming that many of you are engaged in, which is livelihoods and helping people affected by forced displacement get better livelihoods. So to get us all on the same page and to think about the topic, we're going to do a quick Menti poll. So please, I'm going to start the Menti and please use the QR code or the numbers at the top at menti.com to tell me when I say the words jobs and employment and livelihoods, what words come to mind just from the top of your head? What are the things that you think about when I talk about jobs and employment? So please use the QR code and the, here we go. Yes, income. That's a very Important one, right? Skills. Yes, people need skills to do a job. Self-reliance. Yep, very good point. What else? Survival. Absolutely, especially for many of the populations we deal with. Sustainable. Yes, we want these jobs to be sustainable, right? We've got economic inclusion, recognition of prior skill. These are all great. Thank you. Yes, so we're talking about helping people take care of themselves, take care of their families, be self-reliant. Ooh, urbanization is very interesting. You guys have some great ones. Social capital. These are all really great points. So when we talk about jobs or employment, often what comes to mind is a formal job, right? And that is, we're going to talk about that today. But really, when we use the word jobs or employment in this situation, we're talking about them much more broadly. This can include, obviously, a formal job, but it also can include a formal one. It can include jobs that are part-time or gig freelancing. And it does include agriculture, not subsistence agriculture, but any kind of agriculture where you're earning money. So a farmer who's selling her crops or people who are working on farms, that's considered employment. And it also includes self-employment, because if you think about it, if you're an entrepreneur, you're just paying yourself a wage, essentially, right? So when we talk about jobs and employment in the next hour, we're taking a very broad definition. So where do we usually start? You're trying to design a program. You have a displaced population, and you want to help the displaced population and the host community find better jobs in this tough situation. So usually what would you do? You would start by asking, who do we really want to help, right? What do they need? What can they do? And how can we get them more engaged? But this is the wrong approach. And this is potentially going to get you into a lot of trouble. So does anyone know why? We're going to do a quick Zoom poll. Ali is going to put it up. And so please give me a short answer of what's wrong with this approach with starting with the who. You can just give me a word or a phrase. Okay, and I'll show the results in a minute. Let's give it another second to see if anyone else. Okay, good. We've got 13 responses. So, Ali, can you show the results? Or can I? Let me see.
Can you see that?
No, I don't think we can see the results. Can other people see the results? We can see how many people participated, but not the actual answers.
So it looks like there's a button on my end that says view details. I'm not sure what everyone else is saying. But I can read off some of the results if that's okay.
Yes.
So we have, what is the root cause of the problem? You exclude some groups when you're just asking the who. No market for product or skills. It's trying to fit the person to the environment. What are the labor market needs? What is the demand? Missing the jobs. We may omit or not consider something essential. What are the opportunities? Delinked from market demand, might lead to exclusion. Market demand, market demand, market demand. There are 3 in a row.
Very good. Thank you very much, everybody. Yes. Excellent. see what happens. No. Okay, we're going to stop sharing and move on. But thank you very much. Yes, many of you got it. That this basically, this is starting with the one side of the picture, and it's missing that essentially what we're talking about is the basic laws of economics of supply and demand, right? And so we have to start with demand. Yeah, when we ask the who, we miss the point, as many people mentioned, of what are the market opportunities, because you can't just create employment by waving your hand and it will just appear, right? There has to be either existing demand or potential for demand. And this is particularly challenging in the context where we work when there often isn't a lot of demand. So you have to before you set your program outcomes and activities, you have to understand what the demand for labor is first. And so to give a couple of examples from activities I have seen often, you need to understand, is there actually a need for more tailors or more customers for handicrafts? How many small shops can a market profitably hold before it's too many? And can remote tech workers compete in a global marketplace? These are all the kinds of questions you have to answer before you decide what your intervention is. Right? And I think that's self-explanatory to many of you because you got that right in the poll. So we need to start by asking, what is the demand for labor? And we start by asking, who needs labor? Where are they? What are the sectors? And what kind of labor do they need and how many people? And those first questions are questions we can ask existing entrepreneurs and companies, right? So does the construction sector need more labor? Are textile factories hiring? Then the last question is, where is there the potential for growth? That's where we dig deeper to understand where we could actually create jobs and expand labor opportunities. So as I said, the first question we have to answer is where's the demand for labor? And we have to ask that of the entire population, not just the people you care about, because right, a textile factory owner doesn't really care who he's hiring. He just knows that he needs more people. And once we've looked at the demand, we have to go back now and talk about who do we care about? And very specifically, which people are we prioritizing? Are they youth? Are they women? What are their challenges and hopes and skills? And this is a bit different than a mainstream MSD program for, say, agriculture. So those of you who have done a lot of MSD work will know we often don't ask a lot about who, because we're really just looking at the broad systems and how we can make the systems work better for everyone. But obviously, when we're talking about jobs and employment for specific people, the who is at the center of everything, because as somebody said in the poll, you can't just push people into jobs. The jobs have to match the people. So, as we know, it's very important to remember that people are different, right? They're not all the same. And what's a challenge for one person could be an opportunity for another. Some people need a very steady job where they know exactly when they're going to work and how much money they're going to make. For another person, entrepreneurship or freelancing is exactly what they need for their situation. And so you have to understand the specifics and the range of interests and opportunities for the people you care about. And this is even more true for people in forcibly displaced situations because their life may have changed very dramatically. And so you can't just look at what is their situation and opportunities today, but what's their history? What skills do they have? What did they used to do? Did they come from a city or a rural area? Because we have to remember, not everybody can do the same kind of work and not everybody wants to do the same kind of work. And then we need to dig more specifically into what are their challenges. So is it that there's no jobs at all? They can't find a job, or they can find a job, but it doesn't give them enough money. The pay is too low. It's not full time. They don't have the right skills for the jobs available, or the jobs are too far away from all of them. Because these specific challenges are going to determine what your program objective is, right? Those, you're going to create a different program depending on what these specific challenges are. And that's going to lead us to the different types of work that we may support. And so if you look at this as what we often call the triangle of work, there are different ways to help people gain sustainable livelihoods. You can connect them to existing jobs. If there aren't existing jobs, you may need to help them create jobs. Or you may help them if they're in jobs, but they just don't help them earn a living wage, then maybe you give them better work. And the results of all of this activity is the same, right? Which is getting people into good, sustainable livelihoods. But the interventions are going to be very different depending on which of these objectives you pursue. Once we've figured that out, we need to go back to the demand side and connect it up to the supply and think about the specific sectors that might offer the greatest opportunities for the population we care about. And so that's are the jobs that are available relevant to the target group. So to use a very real example for this, in Jordan, there was a lot of work done to help Syrian refugees get jobs. And there were factories in industrial parks that needed workers, but those factories were too far away from the refugee camps. And so nobody in the refugee camps could feasibly take those jobs. So that sector was not relevant. The next question is there actually opportunity to grow that sector if we need to create new jobs? And if so, will that growth actually create new jobs or not, right? Because the growth could be in things that increase profits for businesses, but don't actually create more work. And then the final question we have to ask is the reality check, which is we need to be realistic about what can our program do. Is this a sector that we can influence within the time we have, the money we have? So for example, can we connect food processors to buyers and that will expand the sector and the need for jobs in food processing plants? Or does the sector really need change in government regulations? And do we have the influence to be able to do that? Because you need to be realistic about what your program can achieve within its scope, within its time frame, its budget, its level of influence, etc. How are we doing so far? Can I get a quick thumbs up or thumbs down to see if everyone understands the points? We've got some. Okay, good. If there's anything that you want more explanation on later, put it in the chat and we will come back to it. So let's get into an example now to help you think a bit about the implications of this. So we have the country of Katia, which is just coming out of a long war, both a war internally, but also with its neighbors. And so there's been a lot of displacement. People from Katia have fled they've moved around inside the country and they've fled to neighboring countries. And there are also refugees from those countries in Katia. So we now we've got money from a donor and we want to develop a program to help that conflict affected population regain their livelihoods. And we've done an initial assessment and there's 3 sectors that we think have good potential. So first of all, ecotourism, because Katia is a beautiful country. So there's a lot of potential for tourism. And there are a few hotels and tour companies in the country, but there aren't very many. There aren't a lot of people working in this sector. And Katia has a big public relations problem, image problem, because all everyone has heard about is the war, most international tourists think it's too dangerous to visit Katia. The second sector is transportation, because Katian citizens used to have a really strong train and bus network to go intercity. But the train system has been destroyed, and the public bus company has very few assets left. There's few trucks operating. There are a few private companies with minivan services between the cities, but there's a huge need for more and a wider range of transportation services, cars, minivans, buses, trucks. So there's an opportunity here. And lastly, Katia is famous for its cheese. Before the war, it exported its cheese globally. And that cheese sector exists in a part of the country that was outside of the war zone. So those dairy farms and cheese processors are still there, but many of the people living in that area fled. And so there are not very many people left to work on the farms and the processors. There are, however, refugee camps near the farms and the processors. So we're going to do another quick poll. Well, I want to ask you guys some key questions. So the first question is, what sector do you think offers opportunities for refugee and host community jobs? Please answer which ones you think are going to be the best. Aha, we've got a range. Yep, it's going back and forth. Cheese and transport are dueling it out. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So yes, we have, it looks like cheese. Most people think the cheese sector, followed closely by the transport sector, and tourism has some votes, but it's coming in third. Okay, so those are basically, all of those are correct, right? In that all three of them offer opportunities, but they're going to be for different people and in different time frames, right? So tourism is going to take longer because we need to build the demand. Transportation could offer opportunities for entrepreneurs. It's a great place maybe for youth, but we're going to need to think about who has a driving license and who can drive, right? Because a lot of the jobs will need to be people who can drive. Cheese offers opportunities for people living in rural areas who can work on farms and processors. So the second question now, we've come up with some possible interventions. Can you please match which intervention would you put for which sector? So we've got, okay. Right now, cheese, most people, oh, it's changing around. Yep, I like that all three of them have all three answers. Give it just another second for people to answer. Okay, so we've got for tourism, many people are saying a marketing campaign. Yep, and then also equally some smaller enterprise development skills training, absolutely. For transportation, it's more mixed, a lot of skills training, and then closely followed by small enterprise development. And cheese is mixed between small enterprise development and skills training. Great. Nice job, everybody. So yeah, obviously all three of those can apply. But some of the most obvious things, thinking about the brief explanation, is that clearly there's an opportunity for skill building in cheese, right? Because we have refugees living nearby that have never worked in cheese but have that potential. As I said, transportation could be a great place for small enterprise development, for smaller private transport companies. And tourism, we're definitely going to need the marketing campaign to increase the demand for tourists. So let's now, this is but the key thing this tells us is that we need to know more about these sectors, right? We don't know enough now to design a good program to help the people we care about get good jobs in these sectors. And that's going to bring us to the famous MSD donut. And hopefully, most of you on this call know about the MSD donut. If you don't, I recommend you go to the MSD 101 course on the RSRI website. And that has a good overview of this, but I'll give a brief explanation now also. So an MSD donut is a simple diagram picture of a market system. And at the center of the donut, we have a core economic interaction with a supply of a product or a service and a demand for it. So that could be producing cheese and people buying cheese, or people owning a transport company and people using that service, or hotels and tourists. And at the bottom, we have the rules and norms that influence how that interaction works. So things like taxes and laws, but also things like customers' habits, right? What people want. And at the top, we have the supporting functions necessary to make that exchange occur. So inputs, information, financing. And the key question is, where is labor in this? Where do jobs come into this donut? And the answer is jobs are a supporting function, right? Because if you think about cheese production, labor on the farms and in the factories is a very important element of that production of cheese that is then sold to customers. And this is a very important point because labor is not in the middle. This is not about the supply and demand of jobs. And the only people who put jobs at the middle of a donut are people like us developing jobs programs. Nobody else puts jobs in the middle of the donut. And why is that? Because if you think about that transportation company, their number one issue, they're not thinking about, oh, jobs, how am I going to create jobs? Their number one issue is, how do I find people who want to use my bus service? And the driver, the labor, is just one part of that whole analysis they do. And frankly, usually labor is not their biggest issue. For us, we care the most about labor, but most companies, labor is lower on the list of, if you think about, if you interview entrepreneurs and you ask them what they need, what's the number one thing they always answer? Access to finance, right? They hardly ever say, ooh, I need more people working for me. But we care about labor, right? And so we do need to understand, how does labor fit into this market system? And how can we help people get those jobs, or how can we increase the demand for labor? So we're now going to take that labor. Actually, before we get into the detail, let's look at a more specific donut to help you understand the market system donut. So this is a sector that we work in a lot, right? Because it has a lot of opportunity in the places where we work, which is construction. And we know some of the things that are important in construction are things like zones, where can you build houses, but also what do renters and buyers want to buy or to rent? And then the functions that are important to support that are things like the land, the materials they need, and skilled and unskilled labor is a very important part of construction, right? It's actually a very big part of construction. So we want to understand, how can we help the people we care about get good jobs in the construction sector, or how can we expand the opportunities for jobs in the construction sector? So now we're going to dig into the supply and demand for labor, and we're going to do more market analysis and develop another donut now with labor at the center. So looking at labor within the construction industry. And so now let's look at the donut for construction labor. And we know there's a difference between unskilled and skilled labor. So we're going to look specifically at skilled labor because that offers the opportunity for better jobs within the construction sector. So we talk to a lot of construction companies and we find out that there is a labor shortage and they need more skilled labor. They need more plumbers and electricians, and they can't get enough skilled tradespeople to meet the jobs they have. And so why is that? Why are there not enough trained plumbers and electricians? Do we just go out now and start training plumbers and electricians? No, right? And you know that because that doesn't create sustainable jobs. So now we need to keep asking why. And we need to dig into another donut and another market analysis, looking at what is not working well in the market system for technical training, because there are TVETs, there are apprenticeship programs. So why are there not enough good, available, skilled plumbers, electricians, et cetera, ready to work in the construction sector? And when we answer those questions, we'll understand where we can actually intervene to develop sustainable jobs for the people we care about, say, host community and displaced youth. So before we dig into an example and make you think a bit more, can I get a thumbs up, thumbs down? How is everybody doing? Good job, everybody. Okay, if there's questions, let me know. And so let's now dig into an example again to help you see the implications of this. So let's go back to the Katia tourism example. And let's think about what, just based on your broad understanding, what could be in the rules and norms and supporting functions for the donut, because we think this sector has the opportunity to create good jobs, but they don't exist yet. So we need to understand what are the challenges, right? So question back to you. What do you think are some of the key supporting functions, rules, and norms for the market system for tourism? So use the QR code and the website, and please let me know what you think. You could just freeform anything, any word that pops to mind that's a supporting function. Skilled marketing workers, very good. What else? Security, yes. Security is a very important point. Work permits, yeah. If people can't get work permits, then they can't work in the sector. Rules, yeah. Cultural norms, yes. Who is appropriate? What does the community think is an appropriate person to work in this sector, in the skills trade? Language, women's inclusion, yes. Where are women's jobs culturally acceptable, maybe? Visas, decent wages, yes, a real problem in the construction sector. Very good. Certifications, yeah, for these skilled workers, a huge issue, right? And one that's often overlooked. Transportation. And I was getting confused between construction and tourism sector. Sorry for confusing guys, but yes, all of this tourism, we need to bring in the international workers or the international tourist language. And it's language not just maybe of refugees working in the sector, but language of the tourists, right? And can you speak those international languages? Taxes, working agreements. This is great. Okay, good job, everybody. You came up with a lot of very specific, really good examples. Oh, yes, I like airports and ports. So thinking back to levels of you have to have infrastructure working, right? Okay, so let's go on to, um, oop, So we've got, you gave me some great, really specific examples for supporting functions, rules, and norms in the tourism system. So I put some broader ones here, which are things like, as you guys said, permits, licensing, the regulations for where you can build hotels. What are tourists looking for in their experience when they come? And then on supporting functions, you need information on the market demand, right? And you need, as people point out, transportation to help tourists get there. So where would we intervene in this? Obviously, there's lots of places to intervene, and you guys came up with a lot of good issues that we might want to intervene in the Menti. A few that I thought of is one of these, like, where can you build hotels? We might need to advocate to the government to change the rules around where you can put hotels so we can build more hotels. As was mentioned before, visas, right? We need to make it easy for tourists to come to the country. Then there's issues around marketing, which we've already discussed, but also maybe we need to help the different businesses coordinate better, the hotels, the travel agencies, the tour companies, so that they're working more effectively and creating a good experience for tourists. So a theory of change for part of this program could look like this, where we say if the government creates an easy tourist e-visa, that's going to increase the number of tourists coming to the country. And that increased demand will expand the sector, and that will lead to an increased demand for jobs in this sector. But we're not done yet, because we then need to think, will these jobs that get created, are they appropriate for the people we care about? Will the people we care about get those jobs? Or do we need to do more to help that specific population get those jobs? For the tourism sector, this looks like it's a long and complicated process, right? We're not creating a lot of new tourist jobs in 6 months. And so I don't want to make you too depressed by this, but we use this more complicated example to help you see why it's so important to do this level of analysis at the start of your program. Because if you don't do this right analysis, you could end up training a lot of people for jobs that they will never get or never make any money in, and then you just waste your money and everybody's time. So you need to be realistic. You need to think about what it's going to take to create appropriate jobs for the people you care about. And especially because we know in the places where we work, there are not a lot of just jobs available for people. We often have to help create those jobs. But it doesn't have to be as slow and complicated as this. You can look for quicker sectors or opportunities for lower skilled workers. So maybe in this case, as many of you pointed out in the earlier poll, maybe we choose to work in the transport sector or the cheese sector because those offer much quicker results for people affected by the conflict. So the key here is to be realistic, right? Because we want to set you up for success, not failure. So you need to do all of your analysis up front and then think realistically about what type of jobs can you support. So let's go back to some of the key things we discussed in the last 45 minutes. So as we've discussed, it's really important to understand the specific demand for labor. And often when we talk about creating jobs, what we really mean is just helping people get jobs. And that can only work if those jobs exist. If they don't exist, we have to create new jobs, and that's hard to do. That requires finding sectors that can grow and grow in ways that need more labor, and then that labor has to be appropriate for the people we've prioritized, or we have to do more to help them. And all of this is harder in the fragile places where we work, right? But let's say that the area where we're working has a lot of economic growth and there are available jobs. And so we can focus on matching people, getting them into those jobs or helping make those jobs better. There are still some key questions people often forget to ask. As we've talked a lot about already, specifically, where are those jobs and what kind of jobs are they? So we can't just assume any broad skills training or job information is going to help. We need to understand if there are jobs available, why are people not just getting those jobs now? What are the specific obstacles? Maybe there's lack of information on where those jobs are, or maybe there's discrimination among employers. Why is it that the people we care about aren't just getting those jobs without our help? And we need to understand everyone's incentives. We have to assume people are acting rationally. Do they actually, is there an incentive for people to invest in workers or change their conditions? If there's a lot of labor available, maybe that's not a company's top priority. And so we have to understand why people are making the decisions they are and how we can change the incentives. And finally, a slightly different question, but a really important one is, are lack of skills really the challenge we need to tackle? Because we love to start with skills, right? And we love to dive in to training people. But skills is rarely the biggest challenge in helping people get jobs. It's often down the list of needs. And so we need to understand what are the biggest challenges and where does skill building fit into that before we develop a big skill development program. So to sum up what we have discussed, if we want to help people in forcibly displaced contexts get good, sustainable jobs, we first need to go upstream to look at which sectors need those jobs or products and services or have the potential to. And once we know which sectors there are opportunities in, then we can unpack and really understand what the market system for labor is in those sectors and where are the challenges. And then we need to go downstream to look specifically at some of those specific supporting functions and rules and norms to understand why they're not supporting the people we care about now, and how can we intervene very specifically to help people become more self-reliant in these situations. And as we know, there's one more set of questions we have to ask for refugees, because refugees are dealing with an additional layer of challenges. And the ILO has developed this great donut for the refugee labor market system with the additional questions and things you need to look at to understand what are the challenges refugees have accessing these jobs that you have identified. So that was a very quick, superficial tour through the world of applying MSD to labor programming. And we've just touched on some of the highlights. But I would love to now get from you questions you have. I can stop sharing. So you can put on your cameras if you want. What specific questions do you have? Also, I would love to know are there details of things you would like to know more about as we design possible future trainings or products? And yes, I see the request for the presentation. We will, after this, we will follow up. We will put the entire webinar online with the presentation so people can see it. So questions. I see one here. I wanted to ask about the incentives in the marketplace, like wages, social protection, and social insurance. Yes, this is a huge issue. And actually, this is a point of something maybe that we come back to for a future webinar, because as I pointed at the end, one of the challenges we have often in the context where we work is what are the incentives for people to actually give their workers better wages, or do people have access to social protection And there's two pieces there. One part is the government piece, and I know there's members of our community doing a lot of interesting work connecting market systems programs to social protection. So maybe we can come back and do a specific session on that. The other thing is, if you're working with employers directly, how can we change their incentives and help them see that improving wages will actually help them? So we probably need to do some deeper dives into how would it help them if they treated their workers better or gave better wages? Would that help them retain their skilled workers more? Could they charge higher prices for their goods? And then we need to work on those incentives so that they understand why it's a benefit to them. So that's, again, that's going to be a longer program. You need to have time, but that's a very good question. Yes, and the donut for refugees is a whole big thing that we can talk more about because there's specific questions that you have to add on. But one of the really important points, and the reason I didn't start just with refugees, is as we know, refugees don't exist in a bubble. They're living and working in communities. And so you have to do that broader analysis first. And then maybe once you've done that analysis and you've figured out, okay, the cheese sector in Katia, this is the type of labor the farms and the cheese processors need. This is the type of skills they need. This is how many. Then maybe you look at, okay, what additionally, is there anything we additionally need to do beyond what we're doing for the host community to help refugees get those jobs? But you can't just look at the refugees because you've missed the big picture of what the market system actually is. The market system doesn't exist just for refugees. It exists for all workers in that area. I like a comment. Can we create a working group, a thinking group for individuals like us who work across various environments for us to brainstorm and share best practices? Great idea. That is actually something we've been thinking about. So Ryan, I will come back to you on that. And if others think, please, can I get a quick thumbs up for anyone who'd be interested in joining a group like that? So let me see who. Okay, good. I've got some thumbs up. Great. So we will come back to that because that's actually something we've been thinking about. You've got so many good questions and many of them that could be subjects of maybe even papers or additional webinars. What about the context where the refugees are highly skilled than the available jobs? This is often a problem, right? Especially if you get people who were living in big cities and now suddenly they're displaced to rural areas and there's very few jobs that apply to them. So I don't have an easy answer to this. And actually, it'd be interesting if any of you have done programs that have faced this. If you can put that in the chat, that would be great because I do think it would be worth a paper on this. Part of it is going to possibly be looking more into those communities and understanding deeper the who and the skills they have and then how they can apply in the current context. Great, thank you. So there's people, I will follow up with some of you. Lorraine, if you can put your email address, anyone else who's got some ideas on this, I would love put your email address in. Or Lorraine, do you want to come off mic do you have a good answer to this question?
Yeah, I can. Hi, everyone. So NAML works in the digital economy, and this is what we find a lot of refugees who have these quite advanced skills. They either have quite good computer skills anyway, or can quite easily be upskilled for them to do highly skilled work in the digital economy. And we know there's a lot of demand, as you say. So this is what we found. What we found for particular refugees with these whose skills are more advanced than the community.
Great point. Thank you. Yes. And the tech world is an interesting one because it's a global marketplace. It's actually a great opportunity for highly skilled refugees. I personally think it'd be also fascinating to dive into, you know, when we think about employment and labor, we often think about broad sectors that hire a lot of similar people, like agriculture or manufacturing. But things like accountants and lawyers and some of these skilled areas, that's a place where I rarely see any programs of how do you help people like that work in new contexts. There's more work on that done in places like Europe and the US, but that might be a very interesting place also to dig in more. I'm looking at more questions. Okay. And if there's anyone, complementary pathways. Ryan, do you want to come off mute and say more about that? That's a great point.
I'm not sure if my microphone is working.
We can hear you, yep.
Okay, perfect. So we've only really heard about this through UNHCR and their work or support of Canadian organizations. I forget the name, but yeah, to basically find opportunities for, it's basically what you were talking about in the beginning about looking where there's demand and then looking where the skills are and then matching the two. So across borders, right? So in our context, clients from South Africa might find work in the construction industry in Canada. And then there would be a whole process of integration and all of that.
Very interesting. So that is quite a niche. It's a really interesting example. I will have to dig into that. I've never heard of that example before, with helping a much smaller group of people, but a very interesting sort of filling gaps in the economy. We'll have to, I'll have to dig in more to that. Yes, there's a lot of good questions about incentivizing government. That's a whole other market system, but it's still a system, right? It's still a market system. If you think about government still exists within a system and there are incentives, which is one of the really important things we don't always think about with government is what incentives are they responding to? And how can we change those incentives? That's more be interesting to get some governance people on sometime or some of the people working in social protection to talk more about how you apply this thinking to that. But yes, getting government to adjust is going to be a longer process probably. We've got okay, lots of examples on complementary pathways. So that's great. We'll have to come back. Maybe we'll do a session on complementary pathways because that's intriguing. What else? Cultural adaptation. This is a good point. And I don't know, is anyone working on then how do you, once you've figured out your market system and the opportunities, the additional intervention of helping refugees culturally adapt. There's obvious things you can do, like, you know, interview skills and things around employment, but the bigger and what employers expect. And there can be information available. You can do it direct, or if you think people are going to need this for a long time, you can make it more systemic online and things like that. But the deeper cultural adaptation is a really good question. And I don't know if anyone, you could put in the chat or come off mute, if anyone has working that into a systems approach. I don't see anyone offhand, so maybe that's something we should ask the larger community. So any other, and if anyone has a question they'd like to ask, if you want to just come off mute, you're welcome to and ask it. Okay. So then there's lots. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hello, Sasha. This is Mary from NRC in Moldova. So,
Hi, Mary.
yeah, for this context, you will find that if you look at the rules and norms, they determine a lot of what you can do in employment, especially if you're looking at supporting the refugees, because maybe there are certain laws that might not allow refugees to be in a specific sector or work in certain areas, or they need to have this permit. You know, all these issues, you really have to juggle around the rules and norms or section for you to be able to have work for the refugees, whether it's self-employment or wage employment.
This is a really good point. Yes, and I think it's one of the things that's particularly interesting about or distinct about labor in context of forced displacement is there's two things here, right? Often a lot of general MSD programming, and the classic one is agriculture, your people are much more focused on those supporting functions and how do we help farmers get more access to finance, or how do we create links between farmers and traders and processors. And the rules and norms are less important. But in a labor system, rules and norms often become one of the key blockages, and it may be a place we work more, and particularly then when we're dealing with refugees and things like that, those may become the issue, and it may be more important than the supporting functions. The other thing is these different contexts. We're used to working in contexts often where rules and norms aren't that important, and government regulation is, people just ignore government regulation. But a lot of the places where we support refugees are places with much heavier government engagement, and they are much more important to how the economy functions on a daily basis. So it just shows why you need to do your analysis, and why you have to adapt your activities to those specific constraints. And that is a great place to end because we are at time. Thank you everybody so much for participating. We will put the whole thing online after we're done, and we will follow up with more activities in the next year. We might try and get one more webinar in this year, and we'll think about the topic and more things next year. So definitely give us feedback for what you would like. Oh, and if you're not already signed up, there is an MSD newsletter that you can join to get monthly updates on MSD and how it applies to refugees. So thank you, everybody. Goodbye.